Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little multi-tool here by Leatherman. This is the Leatherman Rev Multitool. First, let's do a quick little size comparison. First, a couple of measures. This is a standard US quarter. This is, for tradition's sake, your Spyderco Delica pocket knife, your Ontario rat number 1. Number 2. And this is the rat number 1. And we'll compare it to some other multi-tools by Leatherman. Here is your Leatherman Wave. Here is your Leatherman Charge TTI, and the Wave is, of course, the Leatherman I recommend, generally speaking, and the Leatherman Squirt P4. And let's close them up so you can see that perspective just as well. The big shtick that the Leatherman Rev has going for it is its price. The Wave here is about $80. Your Charge TTI runs usually someplace in the 140s, and the Rev here is only $30. That's a big difference. That's a big change, and so that is the fundamental difference between these knives here, along with some functional things. But that's really what the Rev has going for it. It's an inexpensive sort of Leatherman. Let's go ahead and, as always, jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this particular multi-tool. So on the good side, first off, it's got a decent enough tool selection. You've got yourself a pair of pliers here with a wire cutter in the middle there. Over here, you have a Phillips head driver, although note that it's kind of a strange Phillips head driver. It comes to a fairly small point, so it won't work with a lot of Phillips head screws. That's life, though. You also have a flathead driver, which can double as a pry bar there. On the other side here, what we've got is this guy here is a package opener, which is really designed for bubble packaging, that kind of thing, and does a pretty good job of that. It's actually sharpened for that use. This right here is a file on this side. It's a ruler marked out in centimeters and inches over here, although that's not super interesting and stellar the way it's done there. And then it's got this smaller flathead bit, and a small flathead bit is a beautiful thing for EDC. There are a lot of cases where that's just super handy. And then finally you have over here a cap lifter / can opener, which is nice. One thing to point out is that the tools don't particularly lock in place. There's some kind of a detent here, a little bit of spring to it, but by and large, these tools are just kind of flopping around there. Even if you shut the knife, the multi-tool that is, they do have some ability to kind of rock and roll around there. Not super ideal. Then finally on the outside here, you've got a knife. This knife does actually lock in place, which is a beautiful thing. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. A couple of good things I want to point out in addition to the tool selection. First off, you will see here that the screws are just boring Torx bits, unlike on a lot of other Leathermans which use a security Torx bit, which is just a proprietary stupid little screw. You can get them elsewhere, but I really do wish that more Leathermans use just basic screws. Makes them easier to maintain, things like that. Next issue, next good thing. The knife on this guy is fine for what you're doing. For $30, no real complaints. The steel here is 420 HC, which is a steel that I don't tend to recommend, but at $30, I won't particularly argue. It's fine. It'll hold an edge okay. It's going to be a little soft, but it's also going to be pretty easy to sharpen, which is nice. Speaking of sharpening, they actually do include a sharpening choil here, which is nice. Makes it a little easier to sharpen the whole blade. And it has actually come rather sharp. I can't really super complain about it. Yeah, could do a better edge, but it's fine for what it is. Then finally, you can see that the blade locks here. If I just try to close it without doing anything, it won't close on me, which is nice. It's got this little locking leaf here. It's basically a liner lock, and you have to push that over, and then you can shut the knife. Nice little feature here. That's one area where you can often cut corners, and I'm glad they didn't. The pliers on this guy are nicely enough shaped. They've got some other annoyances, but the shape of them is good. They're not as round or as pointy as, for instance, on your Leatherman Wave or Charge, but they still work. And in fact, they come together close enough that you can still grab, for instance, an individual hair, if you miss one while shaving, for instance, or a splinter, something along those lines. A lot of your really cheapy pliers have enough gap between the edges that you never quite can do that. So I appreciate that they come together like that. Size-wise, this is smaller than your Wave or your Charge, and it's also lighter. This guy clocks in at 5.9 ounces. The Wave over here comes in at 8.67 ounces, and the Charge comes in at 8.96 ounces. This is substantially lighter than either of these tools. That's a beautiful thing in some applications, and well, it's a beautiful thing in most of them. So that's nice. It comes with a built-in clip, unlike the Wave and the Charge here. which both have an aftermarket clip. It's by Leatherman, but you have to buy it separately. And I like very much the idea of a pocket clip on a multi-tool. It just makes it a little easier to carry. This guy does not come with a sheath or anything in its basic under $30 form, so that's a nice thing to have. You can just throw this guy in your back pocket. Works out just fine. Then finally, on the good side, Leatherman has a very good service and warranty package. They warranty their tools for, I think, like 25 years or something like that, and they tend to be one of those companies where, Leatherman's going to make it right. If something goes wrong, they're going to fix it for you. And so even at this price point, that warranty still applies. Can't really argue with that. So that's the good on this guy. It's got a decent enough little tool selection. It's using a nicer screw than most of your Leathermans. The knife is fine for 20HC. It's a locking blade, and it's a plain edge. I don't remember if I mentioned that or not, but it doesn't have serrations, which I tend to prefer in my knives. They're easier to sharpen and generally more effective. The pliers on them are nice with decent enough coming together tolerances. It's lighter and it's smaller than the Wave. The clip is built in, and Leatherman's got a great service and warranty policy. Let's talk about what's great about this tool. So what's great about this multi-tool is the price point. It comes in under 30 bucks, and that's a really nice price point because at that price, it's cheap enough that you can buy one and leave it someplace. You can throw this guy in a drawer, you can throw it in your cabin, you can throw it in your overnight bag or your bicycling kit or whatever, and just kind of forget about it. For the price of one Leatherman Wave, you can get almost 3 of these guys and scatter them around, and that's kind of a good thing. It means that you've got backups places, and frankly, there are times when, you don't need much tool, but you do need something. And that's where this really comes in. The other thing I'll say is that it's competitive with a lot of your cheapy Chinese sorts of multi-tools that you see at hardware stores and things like that. Store brands, or any brand that makes a drill and a multi-tool, by and large makes a crappy multi-tool. And this has much better quality and a much better warranty. You can trust this a lot more. So the fact that for under 30 bucks you're getting a Leatherman with Leatherman warranty, and you're getting a decent tool, even if it's not perfect, that's pretty great. This price point is excellent. So well done there, Leatherman. Let's talk about the bad. So on the bad side, first off, although Leatherman is an American company, this knife, multi-tool that is not made in the US of A. They're a little cryptic about where it is actually made, so it's probably China. But, that's something that's a little disappointing. A lot of your older Leathermans were made in the States, but at this price point, really, are you going to get a $30 multi-tool made in the States? Probably not. So, not the end of the world. Next thing that's not the end of the world is, on the knife here, there is absolutely no way to open this guy with one hand. I mean, maybe an enterprising soul could find, but I'm going to hurt myself if I continue trying to do that. As opposed to on a lot of your other tools, where there is a thumb hole directly to do it. That's kind of a beautiful thing. This guy is really a two-hand open sort of affair. Is that a big problem? No, not really. But it's another reason why this is a better tool to have someplace than to carry with you everywhere as your pocket knife and your multi-tool and whatnot. Next thing, it's got a knife on it, and I'm wondering if it's got a knife, why it also has a package opener here. In effect, those two things do the exact same thing. The package opener is a little bit better for clamshells, I guess, in that it doesn't penetrate as deeply into there, so you're not going to hurt whatever's inside the packaging. But if you're careful with the knife, that's not an issue either. So I don't see why you have both of those things. That doesn't make all that much sense to me. I'd much rather see a precision driver in there, or maybe a scissors or something along those lines. Whatever. Next thing, the screwdriver I mentioned earlier. Find that over here. You can see here that the screwdriver is built in, as opposed to on your Leatherman Wave or Charge, where you actually get a Leatherman bit kit sort of thing, where you can exchange the bits. And these bits are really incredibly useful. You can buy a kit that's got, 40 different sizes, and you're pretty much always ready to go when you've got that bit kit with you, as well as the Wave here. This guy does not give you that option. There are exactly 3 sizes of screwdriver here. This size Phillips, this big flathead, and the other smaller flathead. Not necessarily ideal. Next issue, as I mentioned earlier, is that these tools do not lock. And so so it's much it's much easier for you to kind of fall off the screw and bend over that way, as opposed to on the Wave or the Charge, or frankly most of Leatherman's other tools, where these lock in place, and at that point there's very little back and forth play, and you can really trust that this is going to stay open. Not the end of the world, but it is a little bit frustrating in use. And then finally, on the bad side, the ergonomics on this guy are just not great relative to your Wave or your Charge. Mostly because as you're using the pliers, you put the wider side here. That's the way it's kind of contoured. But as you're doing this, this little edge here kind of digs into your hand. It's hard to see, but this is actually just kind of curled around here. And so as you're really gripping on these pliers, this is digging into you on this side, this is digging in on the other side, as opposed to, if you look at the Wave, everything's much more rounded, there's a nice contoured surface here. This just feels infinitely better in my hand than your little Rev does. So the ergos are just not stellar here. This is not a very ergonomic multi-tool. But again, it's $30. What am I really complaining about? So that's your bad. It's not made in the States, but again, $30. There's no one-hand open on the knife. Having a knife and a package opener seems a little weird to me. Rather see another tool there. It doesn't support the Leatherman bit kits. The bits don't lock open, or any of these tools don't really lock open, except the knife, that is. And the ergonomics on this guy are really just not very good relative to your Wave or your Charge, or frankly any of your other Leathermans that I've tried. Let's talk about the ugly. Okay, first ugly thing is that the blade here has some blade play. Blade play, if I'm talking about a pocket knife or anything else, is when the knife is in a locked open position, it shouldn't move at all. It should feel like one solid piece. This guy does not. It's got vertical blade play. So if I grab the blade and kind of move it back and forth like this, well, listen. That's a fair amount of play right there. It's not dangerous in that even from the locked open position, it's still fine, and it's not shutting on me accidentally, but I don't like that very much. Horizontal's fine. That's one of those things that's really disquieting, and is a quality control issue that even in a $30 blade, I'm a little concerned about. If this were a dedicated pocket knife and it was doing that, I'd be calling it junk. Here, it's not so crucial because this isn't a dedicated, but it still doesn't bring me any joy. That's something that even at this price point, I'd want them to get right, because that could be problematic. Especially, it reduces the amount of tension required to close the lock bar. I don't know. That bugs me. I'll be real there. Next issue on the ugly side is that the pliers on this seem very, very soft. I have used this relatively little relative to some of my other multi-tools, but already you can see from doing a little bit of wire cutting, there was pretty serious digging in on there. And that actually has deformed it enough that there is much more contact right there in the wire cutters than anywhere else. And so there's a little bit of stick here. I'm just not really impressed with the strength of these pliers relative to the Wave, which I have been using for years. I mean, you can see this guy is just beat the crap here, and yet it's still in pretty good condition. Look at the knife here. I've sharpened this. Oh boy. So I'm really not impressed with the softness of this plier material here. And finally, speaking of the pliers, the detent on the pliers is pretty terrible. On a Leatherman kind of tool, you want there to be a fair amount of resistance to go from this position to fully open. What that means is that if there's a fair amount of resistance, every time that you spread these, the pliers will spread open, no matter what's going on there. On this guy, though, there is very little resistance to fold up the blade, and so it was fairly common for me in using this guy, especially if I just cut into something, that I would go to try and open the pliers by doing one of these things, and instead this piece would fold over, or this piece would fold over. And that's really ugly, because that makes this kind of a weird two-handed plier sort of thing. If it gets stuck in that way, you have to then kind of try and separate the tines yourself, or straighten it out and then kind of grab here. I really don't like that. So they need to have a much tighter detent up here on that. That might be something I can adjust manually by turning on these screws a little bit, but that's one of those things that really does need to be dialed in and provides kind of a serious quality of life issue with using this guy. It's just not that great as working pliers because of that. So, not the end of the world, but it is pretty ugly, and I wish they'd fix it. So that's the ugly. There's some blade play on the knife built in there. The material on the pliers feels very soft. And the detent, the resistance that's holding these the handles straight as you use the pliers is just not very good. Let's talk final conclusions. I mean, final conclusion here, this is a cheap Leatherman, and that's good and bad. I mean, it's good in that it's got enough Leatherman DNA that you can mostly trust it. It's going to be more trustworthy than your really cheapy $5, Walmart multi-tool. And you also get the warranty and the service and things like that. But the thing is, this is still cheap. It's got enough cut corners, it's got enough issues that you're probably not going to be in love in the same way that I am with my Wave over here, or to a lesser extent with my Charge. And you know what? I loaned my Wave and my Charge over to my buddy Ian at the Tekken Tools channel on YouTube. Great channel, by the way. Check it out. For a while, this was my only Leatherman. This is what I was carrying in my pack to do any work. And I'll be honest, those were sad times, because every time I used this, I was mildly disappointed with it. Whether it was the ergonomics, the fit and finish, the lack of using the bit kit, the relatively poor accessibility of the knife, although let's be real here, I'm always carrying a pocket knife, so it's not a huge deal. Chris Reeve Tylock, great knife, by the way. But, and the damn pliers just bugged the crap out of me every time I had to use them. So this is a great backup tool. You stick it in your glove box, your desk at work, in your cabin, someplace you're not going to need it, ideally. But for the love of God, do not buy this as your primary everyday carry multi-tool. Do not buy this expecting to use it every day. If you're going to be using a multi-tool every day, you're going to hate the fact that the ergos aren't great, the tools are lacking, and the construction just isn't up to par. I mean, the whole feeling off of this tool for me is, yeah, this is pretty much adequate. And that's kind of the highest praise I can muster, except for the price being pretty damn good. If you're looking for an everyday multi-tool for you in your life, you will be way happier with the Leatherman Sidekick or the Leatherman Wave. Personally, it's a lot more money. It's almost 3 times the price, but it's way more than 3 times the value and the quality. So, I mean, do better than this for your everyday backup. For your everyday tool. But if you're just after a backup as an alternative to a cheapy Chinese garbage multi-tool that's going to snap on you in a terrible circumstance, this is probably a decent shot. You're not going to love the tool, but you can mostly trust it, and it's going to be adequate. Not so high praise, but at the same time, for $30, okay, I can live with that. So that's your Leatherman Rev. Not going to kick the Wave out of my pocket anytime soon, but that's okay. That's not what this is really meant for. And this will now go back into the glove box of the car, and there you go. Hope that's interesting, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.